Welcome. It's Rochelle Jackson, and I apologize for the delay. There was a little bit of a time delay in the go live button. So, I am your non toxic lifestyle coach, your wellness coach, and essential oil educator. And so far, we've talked about how I've gotten to be in this role. We've talked a little bit about what um, are toxic items in our home. Um, and we've talked a little bit about um, how to mitigate those. But as we move into the winter months, the colder months, we are going to be spending a lot of time with our individual partners or family members. And I wanted to discuss moving into non toxic relationships. And this is a subject that is kind of hard to talk about, to be honest. Um, if you are joining live, I'd love to hear from you. Just hashtag live and your name so I know where you're coming in from. If you're watching on the replay, hashtag replay, and then your name and where you're coming in from as well. So, when it comes to a toxic relationship, it really is defined as um, in a pattern of negativity where one partner causes harm in some way. And it may not be purposeful. It most of the time is not purposeful. Um, However, sometimes it is intentional. That is an abusive relationship. And or manipulative, those are different situations. When I'm talking about a toxic relationship, I'm talking about behaviors that we've learned through childhood, through social norms, through just expectations that we've grown with. And they are overcomable. And you can really strengthen a toxic relationship and head down the right path. However, welcome to those who have joined. If you want to hit hashtag live so I know who you are. Today we're covering toxic relationships. I want to go through and share that, yes, toxic relationships are recoverable. Now we're going to talk at the end about an abusive relationship because that's a different subject. And I want to be very clear. So as a non-toxic lifestyle coach, I coach on all aspects of toxicity. Toxicity in your clothing, toxicity in your cleaners, toxicity in your hair care, facial care, dental care, whatever it might be, your laundry detergent. But I wanted to venture off and really talk about the potential for toxic relationships as we go into the colder months and spend time together. They do have various forms that they can be noticed in. Some might be mutual disrespect, emotional manipulation, or just feeling lonely when you're with the other person. So I can note from psychologist Jason Whiting what 21 signs of a potential toxic relationship are. And I'll just share these briefly. Maybe you're not feeling, maybe you're not feeling respected. You're feeling disrespected. You feel your needs are not met. You're both having a hard time communicating with one another. And sometimes these are perceived, and sometimes they're actual problems. So a perceived difference would be your needs are not met. You're perceiving your needs are not met when you have maybe a need that is a little bit out there or excessive. And in that case, it may not be essential to a relationship. And you may be the one that needs to shift. But there are some idiosyncrasies to that, and we'll go through that as well. But you both have a hard time communicating. So this can be with your child, with your partner, your spouse. It can be with a parent, a friend, all of the above. But you don't feel free to live your life autonomously. You feel like you constantly have to check in with someone and get permission to do something. This is a big sign that this is a toxic relationship. And no, not being or being an adult, you should have that freedom. Now, if you are a teenager or a middle schooler and you're saying, I don't have the autonomy to live my life the way I want, that is a little different situation. You would have to respect your parents in that situation and live by their rules. So there are some balance. There is some balance to that. Another one is that you give more than you get. You feel that you're constantly giving, whether it be of your time or your love or your trying to meet the other person's needs, more than you're getting. You feel undervalued. You feel that you don't have equal value in the relationship. I always say marriages or partnerships are 100-100. And that is true in friendships and in relationships of a marriage type level or a partnership type level. Both people have to give 100% in order to be successful. A 50-50 won't work because then each of you are only giving 50%, and that is not going to be successful. You resent your partner. There's something that your partner does or gets to do that you resent. It's pretty straightforward. One or both of you has become passive aggressive. This is a pretty easy one to spot from the outside looking in. A therapist would be able to identify that right away for you. This is one that children will often exhibit to their parents, but that passive aggressive personality. Your own self-esteem is deteriorating, and depending on how toxic, it may be deteriorating at a very rapid speed. You feel attacked and unsupported, and that's pretty much a norm. Your sleeping and eating patterns have changed. One of the things that is an example of that is engaging in bedtime procrastination because you don't get enough time for yourself during the day. This is a challenge for a lot of parents. We are busy working, we're busy balancing the responsibilities of children. And then when it comes to going to bed, we want some time for ourselves. So we procrastinate bedtime, and that's not healthy. You feel depressed or anxious. That is pretty straightforward. You bring out bad qualities in each other. And these might start slow, they might be minor, but that is a sign that your relationship has gone toxic. You feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells when you're around one another. Your feelings come second to theirs. This may be perceived and it may be reality, but this is a big sign of a codependent relationship. And a codependent relationship is one where there is a need for one person to always be with another. They cannot act independently. They cannot do things on their own. They may have never been outside of a relationship and been independent, or gone to a meal or a movie, or spent time by themselves. So that's one that happens when your feelings come second to theirs. You feel gaslighted or manipulated. Kind of can happen when in any situation, maybe there's a guilt, or there's a comparison of, well, I can do that, why can't you do that? That's something that happens that causes toxicity in relationships. And you don't have to have all of these to be in a toxic relationship. Just a few of these can cause a toxic relationship. You don't feel your best emotionally or mentally around the other person. That's a big sign that you're on the road to a toxic relationship. And you feel alone when you're together. That is a big warning sign. There is also maybe a feeling of lack of trust or excessive jealousy. When that happens, that's usually a mirror reflection of ourselves, where we're in that relationship and we're starting to not be engaged. So we reflect that onto our partner or our loved one or our friend, and it comes out as excessive jealousy or a lack of trust. You feel responsible for everyone's happiness or their happiness particularly. And these are signs of abuse, but you are being abused physically, emotionally, mentally, or sexually. So those are the 21 signs of a toxic relationship. When you're in that, sorry, I skipped to the wrong one. I want to talk about abuse versus toxicity, because I think this can get really sensitive, and I don't want anyone out there thinking they're in a abusive relationship when they're in just a toxic relationship that needs a little help. An abusive relationship is where one partner is always in control. that controlling partner is aware of actions and chooses abusive behaviors to show dominance. So they may become physically abusive, mentally abusive. They will, over time, become so controlling that they beat the person down in that way. There's also the act of manipulation. Now, this is abuse. This is not toxic. And I want to be clear, if you're in an abusive relationship, I encourage you to get help. And you can get matched with a therapist or get call 911 or reach out to the nearest support home that you can find. Those are if you're in an abusive relationship. So abusers control. They control through emotional abuse and physical abuse. They manipulate. They tend to play mind games that manipulate you. They gaslight and undermine your needs and perspectives. In essence, abusive relationships involve an abuser who one is the bully and the other is the victim. And this type of relationship doesn't ever change. It is not a toxic relationship changes. An abusive relationship stays the same. And then there is the cycle of abuse and reconciliation. Abusive relationships can sometimes be tricky to identify because that physical and emotional abuse or financial abuse happens, then there is some sort of redeeming quality, perhaps a gift, or there is some sort of behavior that happens that the person comes pleading back, swearing they'll never engage in that behavior again, only to then in turn physically, emotionally, financially, or mentally abuse. And toxic relationships can turn abusive through physical intimacy, and this can perpetuate abuse through coercion of intimacy. Now, that is the abusive part. I am not focusing on that, but I did want to highlight that if you are feeling that those are your situations, I encourage you to seek help immediately and find a therapist, find a facility that can help you with that type of situation. That's not the main area of my focus, though. So I want to go back and talk about what the impacts of a toxic relationship has on someone. Toxic relationships affect both partners. One person often sees themselves as the victim. Toxic people avoid taking blame or ownership, and they lead issues like overthinking or resentment for each partner individually. They may have begun that way. Maybe it's over time that they've worked this way, and the person is now feeling emotionally drained and stressed. Perhaps there's been some sort of major life change. You've purchased a house and are working on rehabbing a house together. You've had children. You've had a financial setback. Those are things that can cause a relationship to turn toxic. A healthy relationship gives energy to the other person as opposed to taking it away. So impacts of those toxic relationships include the victim would be have worse friendships or lose their friendships, stress, depression, anxiety, PTSD, sleep changes, weight changes, poor performance or lack of performance at work or school, lack of communication in the relationships, just fails to communicate anymore. Short-tempered, they have a very negative inner monologue where they will speak to themselves in a way that they perceive themselves now. And often that is that they are no good, that they don't feel that they are valued by anyone. Whereas a healthy self-outlook or self-relationship would always put oneself first. And if that changes, that negative inner monologue changes, that's a sign that there's a toxic relationship. Complacency, so they're just not as active or involved as they once were. They start developing trust issues, really becoming pessimistic and negative in their moods, and they have a low self-worth. So what do we do? How do you move forward? I mean, some of these things sound pretty bad. I will tell you that most of toxic relationships have one or two big areas, and they're not encompassing the whole thing. So they're not going to hit all 21 of the toxic relationship signs. But just hitting one of them, you want to start to do and take steps to fix that toxic relationship. So setting healthy boundaries and working on your own self-awareness. This is a big shift for someone who's been in that toxic relationship. They're going to really have to concentrate on themselves and focusing on who they are in their value. 6 tips for dealing with toxic relationships are having open and honest conversations. So whether this be your partner, a best friend, a child, sitting down, having open and honest communications about your feelings and actually listening to one another, not interrupting, being constructive and having meaningful conversations is key. And it has to be a time where both partners are rested and in a good headspace. Secondly, do not dwell on the past. In order to overcome a toxic relationship, you really need to focus on moving forward. Those past mistakes are in the past. And today, we can start moving forward, and it's a gift. It's called the present. So paying attention to the past gets in the way of you being attentive to the present. So really taking time to process where you are today and where you want to be is going to be value add. Viewing your partner with compassion. This is a big change for some people. Maybe the person that has been the more bully in the situation is going to have a little more trouble with this. Or maybe the victim is just done and doesn't feel like there's any room left to have compassion. But as hard as it can be, our partners, our friends, our children, our humans, we make mistakes, and there are histories of relationships before us that we have gone through, that we have made mistakes and overcome them. So really coming to your toxic relationship and setting forth the idea of compassion is ideal. It's going to change the way you communicate. It's going to make all the difference in the world. Fourth, you need to take responsibility for your part. There is two people in every relationship. And whether you are the healthy person or the unhealthy person or the bully or the victim, you have to acknowledge your role. So if you have allowed yourself to fall into a place where you no longer have self-value, you have to step up and change. You have to take that time. You have to understand that that other person is not actually holding you back, that you do not actually have to check in with them. Now, if there's physical aggression or verbal aggression, that becomes abusive, and that's another subject. So don't confuse that, but take responsibility for your part in the communication. Don't make cheap apologies or promises. If you're going to intend to heal the relationship, you must make that effort. And then talk to a therapist. There's so much value that can happen through couples therapy. You can do relationship therapy with over the phone. They have internet therapy now. Sometimes these patterns that we fall into of toxic relationships come from our childhood experiences. So we need to have someone help us dig deeper to find out why we're dysfunctional in the way that we are. And then hold space for your partner to change. They're not going to be able to change overnight. And neither will you. So give yourself grace. Give them grace. Give each other time to do the work, time to invest, and time to take self-care. Prioritizing yourself, giving patience to the other person, and making sure that you're holding that space for your partner to change. If in dealing with toxic relationships, there are just simply no steps made by both parties to heal, then sometimes it's time to leave. But I believe, just like we can change our cleaning products to non-toxic cleaning products, and our clothing, our makeup, our skincare, our hair care, all of that, relationships can turn around from toxic to non-toxic as well. So if you're dealing with toxic relationships, seek out additional resources. Find help, use a pastor, find a therapist, and work towards giving each other grace and self-care. This is Rochelle Jackson. And I encourage you to have healthy relationships and really work on turning toxic relationships back into non-toxic relationships. I hope that we can all heal and move in the right direction in those relationships. I pray that you aren't in that situation. However, the truth is, as we get into those winter months, we spend more time with one individual, and the reality becomes that we tend to become selfish in our thoughts or self-centered in our thoughts, and it is prime time for toxic relationships to begin or to escalate. So that's why I wanted to take this opportunity to share a little bit about how to recover from a toxic relationship. And I encourage you to seek out professional help if you are in a toxic relationship. This is not my area of expertise, but I did want to take the opportunity to highlight it this week as it's toxic, and I'm a non-toxic coach. So with all of the peace and joy and self-care I can give you, I wish you the best day and the happiest of relationships. It's time to turn those toxic relationships back into non-toxic, healthy relationships. Namaste.